This video will show you how to sew your own cotton scrub hat. So I started by cutting out my 3 pattern pieces. The small piece, 1B, gets taped to piece 1A, lining up these lines. This is the side of the cap, and piece 2 is the top of the cap. I have my fabric. This is 100% cotton, quilting cotton, and it's important to use cotton because it's durable, breathable, and holds up to high heat and repeated washings. And so I've pre-washed and dried my fabric, which is also important, so that the caps don't shrink once they're washed for the first time. So if you pre-wash and dry your fabric, then they won't shrink once they're washed. So pattern piece 1A gets placed on the fold. So I've pressed and folded my fabric, folded it back the way that it comes on the bolt. So my fold is over here on the left-hand side. So placing piece 1A against the fold and the bottom against the bottom of the fabric, I'll cut that out to get one long side piece. And I'll place piece 2, the top of the cap, right here. Now this fabric is doubled, so this will cut out 2 top pieces. By folding this over, you can cut out 2 caps at the same time in about 12 inches worth of fabric. The other thing I'll say is that even though the pattern is only this big, I'm going to continue cutting my ties all the way to the selvages of the fabric to make them as long as possible. That way they'll be easier to tie. So I cut that as far as my fabric allowed. Now I'm going to cut off the selvages. So now we'll start with pattern piece 2, the top of the cap. Fold this end down about 1/4 inch. Press another 1/4 inch or so and press. You can pin this or just hold it, and I'm going to stitch a straight line right across that hem. Okay, now with right sides together, I'm just going to find the center of this piece, match up the center of the top piece with the center of the side piece, and you should be able to see where it has been folded to match that up. So now I'm going to pin that together starting at the center. Then I will pin this edge all the way around and this edge all the way around. Okay, now that this is pinned, we'll sew this seam. Now using a straight stitch, I'm going to sew all the way around this edge with about 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now this is where if you had a serger, you could just serge this and sew it and finish the edges all in one. I'm going to show it on my regular sewing machine. So that's what most people have. So I'm going to backstitch at the start. Now that this is sewn together, we're going to use a zigzag stitch to finish this edge, just to prevent this edge from fraying and to make it more durable. Okay, and I'm going to start my zigzag. I'm going to start finishing this seam about 2 inches along the straight tie part before it curves. Now we're going to fold down this top edge about 1/4 of an inch all the way around the corner to the edge. I'll use my iron to press that. And then the bottom edge will be pressed up all the way around the cap, and the other side the same as this. Finally, pressing that bottom side, or that end side in as well. Okay, the final step now is to take this bottom edge, fold it up to meet the top edge. And we'll press this up all the way along around the front of the cap to the other side. And this here is why we sewed this seam before this one. A lot of tutorials get you to sew this first, but this lets us keep this edge, finish this edge and have it neatly finished all the way down. And this is the part of the cap that has the most stress put on it, when it's tied. So this makes this style of cap in this construction method more durable. Now, starting at this end, I'm going to sew this and then sew along the top edge, but I'm not going to sew straight across. What I'm going to do is actually reinforce this little curved edge. So we're going to sew along here. I'm going to veer off and sew up to this seam, turn around, go back down, and then continue across around the entire front of the cap. And this is the part I'm gonna sew just as far up as this hem on the back of the cap. Pivot, and then come right back down to continue the seam I was just sewing. Now we'll just pivot the whole thing and continue straight across. And ta-da! So now you can see our finished cap, and at the back where it ties, you can see that having those edges reinforced just adds some strength, and the ties are long enough to tie a nice bow. Now at this point, if you want, this is where you can add a couple of buttons to each side. So near the back, a few inches from that back, where that back tie starts, on either side, some medical professionals have asked for buttons so that they can fasten the elastics of their masks to that as opposed to around their ears. So you can stitch on those buttons and your cap is complete. Hope that was helpful.